Please welcome with a warm round of applause, EngiLifeSciences Senior Vice President, Daniel Martinez. Daniel?
Thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. EngiLifeSciences actually, from the introduction, has two sides to it. One is the medical device regulatory and compliance aspect that we work with medical device manufacturers in the regulatory and compliance side. And the other side is our 3PO model, which is more geared towards change management. Let me start off by saying 3PO is not an AI robot, and it's not from Star Wars. I'll explain it a little bit. The 3 Ps and an O, which is about people, process, performance management, and organizational structure. Before I start talking about what it is that we do, I'd like to get into a little bit about why we do it. Well, here we go. This is a classic statement. We find a world filled with rife complexity, business struggles, quickening technologies, global markets. And in that whole process, we've lost the fundamental goals, or what are the basic principles underlying operational excellence. From a senior and middle management perspective, we're kind of used to the quickening changes and complexities that have to happen because that's what the market demands. What we don't do a very good job on, at least in my experience over the last 30 years, is how do we engage our people in those changes. We know those changes have to happen and we adapt, but how do we help our people adapt and change? And when I'm talking about people, I'm talking the technicians, the supervisors, frontline management. Recent study from the Global State of Operational Excellence Research Outcome for 2000 and 2019, which was top priorities of leading companies. That was a survey done of 1,000 people across 40 separate industries. These are the people that have every tool and methodology you can think of. AI, lean, IT of coming out the yin-yangs, whatever you want, and the number one concern was culture, which is rather interesting. So what's preventing them from getting to their operational excellent levels that they want to get to is the culture of the organization. And that is tricky because what does culture mean? Culture means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But fundamentally, what it is what we do every day and how we treat each other. If we want to understand how to affect culture, the first thing we have to understand is people. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. And when you're talking about change, 80% is about people and 20% is about the technical aspects of it. And what is it that we know about people? Well, people simply don't like change. Why? So we got to understand that principle before we start talking about changing the culture of an organization. A study done here by Rosabeth Moss here, who is at Harvard University, one of the senior people, is also in a group of leadership. She came up with a couple of concepts. She did a lot of literature on it, and I just took out some of the issues that people are concerned about in terms of their fear of change. One is loss of control. So if I am not involved or engaged in that process of change, then I have these concerns. I'm concerned about the loss of control, the uncertainty of it, everything seems different, concerns about my own competence and the ripple effects of it. So let's get into the first one, loss of control. Why? I used to be very comfortable in the behavior that I was doing as the old concept of this is the way we always did it. And now I'm being asked to do it differently. Well, why? If there isn't a clear messaging and an involvement in the why that I can understand, I'm going to start rejecting that. People often prefer to remain mired in the misery of, better what I know, the devil I know, than the devil I don't. So once again, communicating the necessity of the change, why that change is required, and what is your participation in how the organization is going to help you through this change. The other thing that comes concerning, and this I see all the time, And part of it is true because there are some cases where people are really just not competent in their job. They got there because they were the last one standing there at the time, or in some cases, which I've seen quite often, you grab, for example of maintenance, you grab your best electrician and you make him the head of maintenance. So what you've just done is lost your best technical guy and just created a really poor manager. If there's no training in the intersection of going from this position to that position. So that is also a concern. What does this mean to me? This is interesting too. If you start working in one area of an organization and you start creating change, it's not autonomous to itself. There are inputs that come into that department, and then that department is going to create outputs. And in that change within this department, the ripple effect is what's coming from here is now going to be questioned because I'm looking at new processes and new ways of doing things. And what I output from here is going to be questioned from the people who receive this output under the same conditions. So if you're going to actually do a change, you really have to start thinking about holistically looking at the entire value chain and making that change unanimous across the board. Build capacity and create sustainability to conduct work in partnership in order to transfer knowledge, customize methodologies for your specific situation, and provide hands-on coaching to reinforce concepts, tools, and behaviors. And that's the most important part of it, the bottom part, provide hands-on coaching. We'll get to that in a minute in terms of how we approach things. One of the big issues that we find in this change thing, there's two. One is how do we engage people in this change? How do they feel engaged in participating in the success of the organization during this change? And what are the right behaviors that the people in the organization have to have in order to make this change happen? Some of the behavioral cause and effects of what happens if you're not trained and developed in leadership techniques. And you can have a quick look at it, so I don't have to explain all of them. But for example, managers do not take decisions, individuals take over and run teams of their own agenda. And here I'm talking specifically at the supervisory mid-management level. At the more senior levels, we do leadership training, we do a lot of training in those aspects of it. But the people at what I call the coalface that actually make it happen, what are we doing to invest in them to help them through this transitional stage? Because they have to change their behaviors in order to meet the new demands of what's happening out there. So although we have all the tools in the tool bag, have we actually taken the time to train, motivate, mentor the people at the shop floor with handling all these new tools and methodologies? The same for not skilled in managing change. What are some of the issues that you can come up from there? Same. In each case, what we're looking at is if you do not have the right behaviors, then you're losing opportunity to be able to these people to engage and roll out that new change methodologies or tools that were already out there to the rest of the organization. This comes from technicians all the way up. What I have found over many years is if you want to figure out if there's a problem in product development, just go down to the shop floor. If you want to figure out that there's a problem in inventory or supply or quality of raw material, go down to the shop floor. All the problems present themselves at the shop floor. Do we support the people at the shop floor? Well, generally what I find that's happening on the shop floor is that these people are going crazy, either going around systems, creating their own systems, butchering other pieces of equipment to make this other piece work and get stuff out the door. How do we support them in this daily transaction? Because these are the guys that actually translate the concept that we have of getting a product out the door and actually creating the concept to make it happen. We don't seem to invest a lot of money or time in those people that they're actually the people that make it happen. Quick, interesting survey that I decided to throw in here. Society of Human Resource Management did a questionnaire, and they found out, they took a look at prioritize what the 10 top contributors of job satisfactions are, as opposed to, and the other part was the 10 top employee engagement conditions. That's real interesting. If you compare both, and some people believe that if I have a satisfied job force, I have a happy group of productive people. If you take a look at the differentiator between both, it's quite interesting. The engagement aspect of people that are looking for that structure or that behavior of engagement is quite telling, because that really drives the type of behaviors that we want to see in our people in the organization. There was a study done by Gallup, and it came out that last year, lost productivity of disengaged employees cost the US manufacturing $370 billion. So that's a big chunk of change out there that's out there to grab. So what we want to take a look at is how do we get people engaged and how do we help change that behavior. So we're on the soft side of this. Of course, we understand Lean and Six Sigma and all the methodologies and tools that are out there. But our focus is really on the shop floor. How do we implement or help implement those tools to the people that are using them every single day? That's our focus. The 3PO model. Well, here we go. Here's the translation. People, process, performance management, and organization with a very specific view on people. Once we've identified a need, and that's the first thing you have to get to, what is the need? Once you identify a need, then we do what we call an analysis or a diagnostic or a health check. It depends what you want to do. And in that analysis, which depending on the scope and the size of the organization, can be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. What are the things we want to take a look at? We want to start with some focused discussions. Focused discussions is an opportunity for us to sit down with managers and supervisors and understand and determine what their strengths and weaknesses are. Type of questions that we ask first day we meet them. We go into their office, we're going to their shack, wherever it is on the plant floor, and we go, okay, tell me a little bit about your area. How many people have you got? What are the goals of your area? What are your major issues? What are your problems? What are the resources that you're managing? How many, a bit of an understanding so that we get a feeling and an introduction to what their issues are on an ongoing basis. We take a look at statistical review because that's all about the financials. We take a look and conduct observations, and the observations are to reinforce the statistical review, the focus discussions in terms of saying, okay, this is what we're seeing from a data perspective. There's plenty of data out there, so we can manipulate some data and take a look at it. But let's do some actual observations to confirm that what we're seeing from a data perspective is actually happening realistically on the shop floor. There's a lot of consulting groups that can do an analysis from the boardroom. We are not that type of people, because we believe that in order to get real information, you have to be on the ground where things are happening with the people that make it happen. So we want to contrast what's being reported to what's actually happening. We also take a look at process flows, value chain mapping, value chain analysis, but we take a look at it from a different perspective, because what we're taking a look at is in these processes, we're trying to identify what has value and what doesn't have value. That's really the focus of it. If we can eliminate non-value added activities and focus on value added activities, we're already increasing the efficiency and productivity of these processes. So what we do with supervisors is, after we've had an initial introduction of the focus meetings and so on, we say, John, we're going to spend a day with you, and we're going to just shadow you during the course of the day. We want to get a feel for what kind of issues you have to deal with, the kind of problems you deal with, the interaction you have with your people, how you set up goals, how you give positive and negative reinforcements, and so on and so forth. And before we start, we ask them, how would you like to spend your day today? And in these basic categories, direct supervision, indirect supervision, travel time, administrative time, routine, available, and technical. And so they give us their perception of how they would like to spend their day. At the end of 8 hours, when we spend the day with them, and during this time we're taking multitudinous notes. Like almost every 5 minutes or whenever there's an event or an interaction, we write down when the interaction happened, what happened in that interaction, what are some of the issues. It gives us a couple of really good ideas, because the first thing it does is it starts identifying issues issues that we need to attack from either a process perspective, from a performance management perspective, from a troubleshooting perspective, from a problem-solving perspective, because we're out there really facing a regular, normal day. And at the end of the day, after we go through with them and we download, how was your day? Was this a typical day? Is this like a day that's, I mean, depending on how the day works, if it was really crazy and they want to make a good impression on us, they go, oh, this was a crazy, crazy day, man. This is not what normal is. Well, we usually do this 2 or 3 times with the same supervisors, just to make sure that it wasn't an off crazy day. So at the end of it, we say, how do you think you spent your day? And these are actual numbers. And so they give us some feedback. This is what I think, how my day went. And then we ask him, well, we don't ask him, but we show him from the documentation that we've done during those 8 hours, how you actually spent your day. So what we want to be able to show him is there's a difference between perception and reality and what you want to do and what actually happens. And how can we work together to start focusing on how we can make what your goal is reachable. So that's just an example. So it's more than just about how you spend your time. It's about understanding what that time is. So if you have a different perception of direct supervision, let's understand what direct supervision is, and let's go through that criteria of what you perceive to be what a good day was to what it actually was. So that's how we get into that engagement. We do all this because when we work in an organization, we work at the shop floor every day. We're not in the boardroom. We work to mentor these people through the process. And our training, there's 2 types of training. We do classroom training on site, and it's really about managing the basic tools and how you interact with people and making sure they understand what performance is, what productivity is, what efficiency is, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, if you do it when you're on the shop floor, and I've heard these stories many times, you know, we send people out for 40 hours of training. By the time they get back to the shop, they've forgotten half of it. By the time the first crisis comes up, they immediately go back to their old behaviors and forgot all of it. So if you are there mentoring someone and they hit a situation that is a crisis situation, and instead of allowing them to get back into their old behavior of what they would have done, there's a mentor there to help support them and say, hey, remember we talked about this and how we were going to handle that? We were going to approach it this way instead of the old standard way. That's what helps that change happen. You really have to support people on a daily basis through crisis to be able to develop them into what the right behavior is. There's also the theory that, you know, it's very exciting to be a firefighter. And a lot of people like to create situations to be a fighter so that they come out as a hero. So the differentiator is, wouldn't it be nice if it was a less stressful day and a better planned day so that you don't have to be running around firefighting all day and doing things that, as you perceived in the beginning, what you'd like to spend your time on was more that than firefighting. So that's that mentoring process that we're trying to get through to them. A couple of the things we do, all the other process mapping, process efficiency analysis, and et cetera. But, you know, the standard process flow. Now we do process mapping analysis across the entire chain. So when we take a look at a process, we don't compartmentalize it. Wow, you know the word. In one particular area. We take a look at it from beginning to end as one process. And in that, we take a look at what are the restraints through the whole value chain. Now that's great from a boardroom perspective, if you can do it from the boardroom and take the data and do it that way, but how does that engage people? It doesn't. And we want to engage them to be able to be the people that actually help with the solutions. 95% of the time, the people on the shop floor know what the problems are. They know them because they see them every day. What they don't have the capability of is resolving them. What they don't have the capability of is being able to forcibly, in some way, push this back up the management scale so that they can get help and support to resolve that issue right away. So if we take them down, and we use old school, which is take a big piece of brown paper that's 6 feet wide, and as long as it's going to take, you take every document that's in that department, you plaster it up on the wall, you do a flow map of what comes in, what goes out, how come and wherefore, and then you get the people involved in the department to critique it. What could be better? This is where we get into value added and non-value added in the detail of each document. Because if you take a look at a document, in a lot of cases, only half the information is used. So why is there the requirement for all this information that's on this document if we're only using half this document? Let's rethink that. Let's re-engineer that. Let's take a look at the value proposition in terms of the information that we have. Let's look at the information that we need as opposed to the information that we have. And if we do that department by department by department, then you get that whole flow from start to finish of identifying specifically, with the input of the people that are involved and the people that are going to be using this on a daily basis, they see the engagement and participation in being able to come to a solution. Back to, if you have an engaged workforce, there's an opportunity of creating tremendous savings, for one, productivity and efficiency, because they're engaged. They will not be afraid and concerned with change concerns me because I'm part of that change. I'm part of making that change happen. And then, the typical mapping of what is value added, what is non-value added, what can we eliminate, and so on and so forth. But that is all with the participation of the people on the shop floor. Performance management. Well, this is something we see all the time. But what we're taking a look at is, in each one of these areas right here, do we have the tool to begin with? And how much of that tool do we use? So we have a lot of tools. Are we using all those tools? Okay, if we're not using all those tools, then why do we have all these tools? So that's what, now this is just a composite, so there's a whole bunch of things of what the kind of stuff we're taking a look at, KPIs, performance management, how come, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the composite of it, and what we want to understand is what are we using and what is available to be used, and what do we have to change in that? Do we have to use more of what's available? Do we need what's available? Do we change that? And then we do a basic, red light, green light, orange light. Do we have operating goals and objectives? It's available. We have some availability there. Do we use it? Half the time. Forecasting and planning. Well, it's kind of available, but do we use it? No, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we take them down through the storyline so that they understand what's out there and what is it. And then senior management understands the reality of what is out there and what is being used and what is not being used, and what we have to do and provide the support for the people on the shop floor so that they have the tools necessary to make it happen. From an organizational perspective, we give out some questionnaires, and they're questionnaires about, and this is what we call the enterprise health check, it's questionnaires about what you perceive, where are we in terms of what we perceive are the fundamental operational requirements. From a business focus, leadership style, performance management, and it's a questionnaire that has, totally have it to totally not have it, and things in between. And it gives you a first pass of an understanding of what's out there, or at least what's perceived to be out there from the organizational perspective, so that it gives you an idea of what direction do we want to move in. Now, that's rough pass first time, and that's on the analysis, we just do a global overview. From a project perspective, we'd get down to an understanding and doing some workshops of saying, okay, this is what you perceive is happening out there. Let's take a look at how, and confirm what is actually happening or not. And let's identify where you want to be 2-3 years from now and see what that looks like. And then we've identified a gap. How do we go from here to there? What are the requirements to get there? Okay, the inputs and outputs of the analysis, what are we looking for? Phase one, like I said, is somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks. And what we want to take a look at is basically through process, through people, through performance management, and through organizational audits, which is really span of control. Where are we? This is the snapshot of where we are now. We put together a cost-benefit plan because one of the things we believe is If in fact what we do, and we believe it is, has a value to it, then there should be a return on investment on that value. So in other words, we guarantee a minimum one-to-one return on your investment on any operational project that we do. And those benefits are going to come from improved productivity and efficiency and cost reduction in certain areas, whether it's maintenance or more uptime, more utilization, less scrap, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're going to measure, and we lay out a cost-benefit plan that says the cost of the project is going to start here. The improvements or the savings are going to start at this week. They're going to start accumulating department by department at this level. And so your max out of pocket by the end of the project is going to be 50% of the total cost. And your annualized savings at the end of the project will cover that one-to-one return minimally. What we usually get is 1.5, 2 to 1, depending on, and this is important, depending on how engaged senior management is in pushing that project forward. And by engaged, I mean is taking the time to send the message through the organization that says, this is not the flavor of the month. We're committed to this. We're committed to supporting you during this. We have brought some people in to help you and mentor you through this process and this change because we want us all to be successful. Tentative project schedule, which lays out step by step, week by week, what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and at the bottom, we start measuring where those impacts of the benefits are going to come into the organization on a week-to-week basis so that you can see the benefits coming into the organization, not at the end of a project, and we're all going to sit down and fight about, did I get my savings or did I not get my savings? We're going to measure those savings continuously on a week-to-week basis through the course of the project so you can see what's happening and that we're getting to where we want to be.